Every year, when the Muslim festival of Ramadan comes around, the media and the newspapers are full of stories laying into Islam, questioning the reliability of the Quran, questioning Muhammad, and even whether he existed, and so it goes on. Hang on a minute. No, sorry, that's Easter, isn't it? Interesting. I wonder what the attack will be this year. I actually admire our critics and the skeptics in the media for having figured out that if you want to cut Christianity off at the knees, Easter and the story of Jesus' death and resurrection is the place to go. If Jesus didn't rise from the dead, then our faith is useless. We are to be pitied above all people. So why do Christians believe in the resurrection of Jesus? Do we just believe it because we believe it because we believe it? Because it's a nice story? Because we've been smoking something pleasant? There are a number of facts around the death and the resurrection of Jesus that are very hard to explain. In fact, impossible, I would suggest, to explain, taken together, unless the stories of Easter are true. What are they? Fact number one, that Jesus was killed by crucifixion. As one skeptical scholar put it, the crucifixion of Jesus by the Romans sometime around about 30 AD is probably one of the best attested facts of ancient history. Why? Well, because no Christian or Jew would make up the story of the crucifixion of Jesus. Christians, and the first Christians were all Jewish, they believed that Jesus was the Messiah, and the Messiah was supposed to overthrow and defeat the Romans, not get killed by them. In fact, you can see on the pages of the New Testament the first Christians struggling with the embarrassment, particularly in the Jewish world, of the story and the scandal of the cross. Secondly, on the Sunday morning, Jesus' tomb was found empty by a group of his women followers. The testimony of women was considered to be almost worthless in the ancient world, back in those non-progressive times. And so if you were the first Christians making up the story of Easter Sunday, you would not have the women there as the discoverers of the tomb. You would have good, reliable, male, first-century Jewish witnesses, people like Paul or James or John. The fact that the women are there, why are they there? Well, the only reason that historians can come up with is because that was what happened. It's also interesting to notice that preserved on the pages of the Gospels, and in fact in Jewish literature, we have the attacks of the enemies of the early church, particularly the Jewish authorities who wanted to repudiate the first Christians. And they don't deny the empty tomb. They simply claim that disciples stole the body. See what's interesting? Both the early Christians and their opponents agreed on one thing. The tomb was empty. The only disagreement was about why. Thirdly, we're on very strong ground with our next piece of evidence that the first Christians had encounters with what they believed to be the resurrected Jesus, risen from the grave. Those resurrection stories are all over the pages of the New Testament. And again, historians take it as a given that something dramatic happened. In fact, the Jewish historian Pinchas Lapide once remarked, he said, "We have to ask the question as historians, what transformed the first Christians from a terrified bunch of men and women in fear of their lives to the most self-confident missionary force in world history? What transformed those disciples?" And we have to remember, of course, that almost many of the first Christians gave their lives and died for proclaiming the truth of the resurrection. And as another historian remarked, liars make bad martyrs. And then fourthly and finally, we have the transformation of skeptics. Recorded there in history, we have the lives of several people who went from being skeptics and doubters about Jesus to actually being believers and converts based on the resurrection. Perhaps the most famous is the Apostle Paul, who went from being a persecutor of the early Christians, murdering the first Christians, to then after the resurrected Jesus appears to him on the Damascus Road, his life turns around. He becomes this incredible preacher and missionary and advocate of the Christian faith and ends up giving his life for what he believed. Those are the four facts. Now, what are you going to do? Put your fingers in your ears, cover your eyes, sing la 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 and ignore them? Or fall at Jesus' feet and say, "You are Lord and you are God and my life is yours"? The one thing we all have to do is choose. The one thing you cannot do is sit on the fence. This Easter, I challenge you, if you haven't already done so, think carefully and choose wisely.